our efforts in public relations, and we have invited our international offices to give us a little bit of an update in terms of the media landscapes in the different regions that we're active in. So from the US, we're welcoming Alison Ross from PM Group. We have Barbara Jessen from Jessen & Company in Canada to give us an update on the Canadian media landscape, Laura Maffel-Williams from our UK team, and Osma Maduro from the Latin American market representative. This is going to be the first part of today's panel. We're going to be discussing the PR efforts in those markets. And the second part of the panel, we're going to have panelists, media representatives into our panel. From the US, we're welcoming Mr. John Woven from Travel and Leisure. From Canada, we have Ms. Vivian Bassos from Zuma Magazine. From the UK, we're welcoming Nigel Tistel, whose experience in the Caribbean encompasses about 3 decades. Very much looking forward to speaking to all of you. And from South America, we have Ms. Eduarda Miranda from Brazil Travel News to give us an update on the Latin American markets. And furthermore, I would just one more time like to share the purpose of this workshop. Ultimately, it is about showcasing what the Anguilla Tourist Board is doing on the international market, how we are having structured our PR activities, and of course, how we react to changing trends. We want to also showcase and help industry partners to understand how to be involved in our PR efforts and how they can best prepare themselves when they receive media inquiries or requests for visits, for press trips, etc. And of course, we want to hear from our experts, from our media representatives, some expert tips and what can we take away from it to become even to better support media representatives coming to the island or coming to any destination. We just wanted to showcase the PESO model one more time. Sometimes it's underestimated, sometimes it's overused, but in this public relations landscape, it's just, I think, very important to showcase where this panel is actually moving around. And we are in the earned media sphere ultimately. It's about working with media directly. It's about the editorial purposes. It's less about any economical reason to furnish and to establish a story, let's say. When we talk about PESO, when we talk about paid, earned, shared, and owned media, as you can see to the left and right, there are different categories, which over the past 10, 15 years have actually expanded much more, with social media coming in, with companies actually producing their own news, which goes much more into owned media at this stage, and is combined, of course, with any paid, shared, or owned efforts. As I said, quite important to understand where this discussion is going to move along, that we are in the earned media space, where it is about nurturing relationships with media. We're going to start in one of our most important markets in terms of visitation numbers, that is the US. And we would like to hear from Alison an update on the market. Alison, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Georges, and good morning, everyone. The US media market is extremely fragmented and fairly cluttered. Despite the consolidation that's been taking place over the years, the number of channels is actually multiplying, and the boundaries between media sectors is blurring, in the sense that all the traditional print publications all have a digital presence, and even traditional journalists, really work really hard to cultivate followers on their social media platforms. The pandemic decimated some publications, but boosted others. For example, the New York Times ceased printing their travel section. It became totally digital, but some lifestyle publications like Food and Wine saw their numbers and readership soar. So the good news is that overall media consumption continues to grow. And this is also because today there's really no one way that people absorb content. People get their information from a variety of news sources. And what's important to remember is that older demographics, who still form a significant portion of Anguilla's audience, they continue to rely on traditional media for both information and entertainment. So digital and social media have opened up new channels of communication, but they're a wonderful complement. They're not a replacement for traditional media. And the bottom line is that it's still all about content. It's about storytelling. It's about identifying your audience, crafting a message, and then delivering that message across all platforms in the format best suited for that platform. And the exciting thing about this, proliferation of media channels is that whoever your audience is and whatever their interests are, there is a media channel that speaks directly to that individual. So a little about the key media outlets. There are really just three newspapers that could be considered national publications. The Wall Street Journal is largest by paid circulation, a leading source of business and financial news. The New York Times is still regarded as the number one in overall reach of US opinion leaders. And USA Today, with 7 million readers, is a leader in mobile applications. On the magazine front, Meredith is a powerhouse. They were just bought by Dotdash, which is a digital media company. The New York Times, in making the announcement, declared that a digital age magazine giant has been born. Their titles include People, Food and Wine, InStyle, Travel and Leisure. Hearst is a global media news company. They owned cable TV networks, newspapers, magazines. Some of their titles include Town and Country, Elle and Men's Health. And Tribune Publishing, they operate local media in 8 markets, but they do have some influential titles such as the Los Angeles Times, and the Chicago Tribune. So moving on to broadcast, broadcast is kind of like the Wild West. I mean, the traditional networks, CBS, ABC, NBC, PBS is the nonprofit station. They take a lot of BBC programming, and they have a very broad-based audience. They do a little bit of everything, news, drama, sports, music, whatever. The cable networks, on the other hand, are designed for niche audiences and specialty interests. They're designed around news, like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, sports, ESPN, Fox Sports, food, nature, think natural geographic, shopping, whatever. And then there are also some premium cable networks such as HBO and Showtime that attack a fee for access. But the big news is really in the streaming services led by Netflix, Apple TV, and Disney+. All the traditional networks now have streaming platforms because they recognize that audiences want to consume content where and when they wish. They don't want to be tied to 8 o'clock on a Monday night for their favorite show. What's interesting in this sphere, though, is that they're increasingly producing original and award-winning content. I mean, Netflix had 44 Emmys, more than any other network or platform this year, and it was a first. So they are a force to be reckoned with. So finally, we'd just like to share a little of the media that we have generated for Anguilla over the past few months. In Food and Wine, we're in the December issue. Town and Country, Travel and Leisure, Travel Weekly is the major trade. New York Daily News. Park is a new upscale magazine that just debuted a few months ago. And of course, USA Today for our general news. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Barbara, who will take you through the Canadian media landscape.
Thank you, Alison.
Barbara, I think you just need to unmute.
Thank you. So sorry. So Canada has really had the pandemic has played a devastating role among the Canadian media. If you think about it in context, our media pool is about 1/10 the size of the pool in the US. It sort of relates to population. And many of them were forced to give up print during the pandemic. This has had an interesting impact on readership because all of our research up until the pandemic told us that in lifestyle and travel categories, people still enjoyed reading in print. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not that comes back. We are hearing from a number of publications that they are actually putting out their first print issues in the new year. So we'll be watching that very closely. Media conglomerates like in the United States are playing an increasingly significant role, and interesting partnerships are emerging that we can take advantage of. I think one of our panelists, Vivian Vassos, is a good representative of that. The Zoomer Group, I think, brings us a number of different kinds of opportunities. I was referring to pay to play. This is becoming another factor that's very important in our market, but I was corrected the other day that I should refer to this as partnerships. But the reality is that media has struggled, and we are in a partnership with them, and they are looking for ways to monetize what they're doing. So more and more, even though we will get print editorial coverage, they're looking for ways for us to support them across the board, and we have to be cognizant of that. By example, if you want to get broadcast coverage in Canada now on some of our morning shows and different kinds of opportunities, they're really looking for us to bring audience prizes of significant value so that we support their audience numbers. So all of those things are going to be factors as we move forward in 2022. We're also seeing a number of media innovations, and some of them have been around for a while, but they're playing out in different ways. One example is that some of our media, and again, Vivian is a good example of that, are now hosting their own tours and taking their readers on exclusive kinds of visits to other countries. And they're looking for our participation in that. Our broadcast segment, like our travel segments, virtually disappeared during the pandemic, although there was a lot of online streaming, which was significant. But we are also seeing that our travel sections are returning as we begin to emerge from this. Let's hope we're emerging from it. This new variant obviously may have an impact on that. But the Toronto Star, by example, was acquired last year, and the new owners are very interested in investing in building the newspaper up again. So that travel section is back. In terms of our key media outlet. Am I getting the signal that I'm talking too much? Is that the deal here?
Sorry, that was my.
Okay. So some of our key media outlets, I just mentioned the Toronto Star. Obviously, the Globe and Mail is our national newspaper, and we actually have two national newspapers, the National Post as well. And the important thing about the National Post is it's part of a group called Post Media. So we not only get major coverage in the national newspaper, but also in a number of regional papers as well, if we hit it lucky with the National Post. So it's an important part of our group. St. Joseph's Media is the largest Canadian publisher of trusted magazine brands and operates across a number of different platforms. So they're a very important player. Zoomer is, it's interesting because it positions itself as playing to a senior audience, but actually its demographic, I think, runs from about 40 plus. And it is, but however, for the mature Canadian audience. And they have a number of media outlet partners as well. So it's in a very important group. And then Bold Magazine is our premium travel and leisure magazine, focusing on the luxury resorts, spas, food and lifestyle. So although their numbers aren't as significant, we always are balancing whether or not we're getting coverage in those significant lifestyle publications versus whether we're getting mass numbers, and we try to find a mix of that in everything that we do. Next slide, please. And this is just a sample of the kind of coverage that we've been generating, and we're really proud of our results in Canada. As Alison alluded to earlier, storytelling is everything in developing relationships with the media, and we hear from them frequently that although perhaps they can't use a story that we share with them immediately, people are filing our stories because they recognize the value of our content. So that's significant and appears in the results that you're seeing in front of you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Barbara. You should be very proud of what you've been producing and established over the past years. Shall we move on to the UK, please, Laura?
Good morning. So yes, from the UK. So travel editorial in the UK has always been hugely important and still is very important. You know, we're a small island, but we love to travel. And certainly when it comes to long haul destinations for us, like the Caribbean, it's, people tend to take a longer trip because to make it worth your while. We're also obviously riding the wave of the fact that in the current circumstances, the Caribbean is seen as pretty much the safest place to go. So there has been a decrease in travel dedicated titles in the UK, but that was not necessarily all down to the pandemic. We lost Lonely Planet, we lost Sunday Times Travel magazine, but there are other magazines that have come in and scooped up those audiences, like Wanderlust and National Geographic Traveller. The comment there about the top travel writers and their standards. I think we'll come on to this in the Q&A section in terms of how to work with journalists. But obviously one of the key ways for people in the UK to really understand the appeal of somewhere as far away as Anguilla is to have it written in a first person narrative from someone that's actually been to visit. So during the pandemic, lots of editors have relied on previously filed features, We're now at the point where most of that stock, if you like, of articles has been exhausted. So it's really good to continue to have new ideas coming through. People like Nigel will tell you he's very good at finding a new angle to include lots of different destinations. So there was a piece last weekend about art that was focused around some painting classes in St. Lucia, but was obviously a great opportunity to include some of the art at Belmont Capjaluca. And we'd also kind of discussed a couple of ideas around that. It's quite a small world in travel in the UK, so both journalists and PRs. It's a relatively small network. But what that means for you is that you can effectively get more bang for your buck by talking to directing things through one person and reaching more, and then obviously reaching even more readers. So yeah, going back to what I was saying about those stocks that people have said, there's lots of opportunity to get new content out there. The Daily Mail, we just had a little run of 3 double-page features that were all about the Caribbean, but Anguilla featured in every single one. The Telegraph, thanks Nigel. The Times is the other broadsheet that is well reputed for its travel content, so it's always great to get in there. National Geographic Traveller, I'm sure you're all familiar with because it's a global publication. Obviously, they have a real push for spectacular imagery and things that are slightly more off the beaten track. And then Condé Nast Traveller is at the more luxury end. And then when you're looking at more mainstream, which again, from the UK perspective, we like to promote the island as being not just luxury, but there are more affordable options in the charming escapes properties and that kind of side. So there you're looking at tabloid dailies like the Express, the Mirror, the Star, and then they also have a massive reach across regional titles. There's a couple of examples of coverage there. So there's a piece in National Geographic, The Times, also Travel Weekly, because obviously it's important that travel trade know what we're up to, know what's happening on Ireland, and then across into Northern Ireland as well, and Scotland with the Sunday Mail. Over to Osmar.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you for this update. Osmar?
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Georgios. Good afternoon from São Paulo, Brazil. Can we change the slide, please? Thank you. So in South America, the preference for the experience at the hotel, restaurant, or destination has also impregnated traditional media, something that was widely spread by bloggers and influencers. These two, bloggers and influencers, must not be neglected in a communications plan. And in many situations, they have taken the empty space left by traditional media and delivered the same or even better reach. Sorry. Due to the crisis generated by economy, new formats of media outlets, and more recently the pandemic, paid content or advertorials are widely spread. And in some most desired media outlets, the only way to have their content published is by pay. Print media outlets have become a niche. They are still important, especially in the AAA segment, but the reach numbers that an online media outlet can get is normally higher. TV and radio can offer even higher numbers of reach, but they are harder to get, as very few have tourism dedicated programs or that are relevant in terms of audience, which is the case of with many bloggers and influencers who are also delivering content on TV, but they don't have the same reach on this channel because usually it's a less watched channel, not the main TV channels. According to a research led by Inter-American in Latin America, actually, the most trusted, this research was conducted in October, so it's really recent data. The most trusted means of information for tourists in South America are in this order: the press, traditional press, Google, the Oracle, right? Blogs, and then social media. Moving on to the next slide, we have two major media conglomerates from Brazil, two from Argentina, and two from Colombia. These three are the main markets of the region in terms of sending tourists overseas. Grupo O Globo and Grupo Abril dominate in Brazil with many different platforms and media outlets, including Globo TV, which is the #1 media outlet in the country and probably in the region in terms of reach. Grupo Clarín and La Nación are the most traditional in Argentina. And with the different platforms and media outlets, they have the best reach in the country. In Colombia, we have El Tiempo and El Espectador as the main targets in terms of reaching the right audience for Anguilla in this country. And then finally getting to some sample coverage. As we have many countries, I had to nail down to 3 clips here in Argentina. Infobae is a very important news portal in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Viagem e Turismo is the most traditional tourism media outlet in Brazil, which used to be print, but now the last 5 years with the crisis, the economic crisis, now it's only online, but it still has an amazing reach. And Dahomet is a luxury magazine from Colombia with great tourism content. So with that, I hand it back to Georgios. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osmar. Thank you very much, everyone. I think that was a great update the last 20 minutes. We went once around the world almost. And I would like now to all of our panelists to properly join this session for a little Q&A and a little bit of a discussion about PR, reigniting the brand messaging, but also about storytelling and the very basic things like media support. So if our panelists would like to just unmute, and in the background, my colleagues are pinning you all towards the top of the pin scale. So actually, I would like to start my first question with Nigel. Nigel, you've been in the Caribbean, or you've traveled to the Caribbean probably for the last 3 decades, if I'm not mistaken. Can you maybe tell us a little bit what have you seen changing, or how the region has developed in terms of their media support, or how have you as a writer adapted to the way of working, or vice versa?
Absolutely. I've just done 4 trips to the Caribbean in the last 6 weeks. It's a very important market to the UK. And I think putting the pandemic to one side, it's really just confirmed what trends that were already in place. One is what I call experiential. Let's say people don't just want to fly and flop. They really want to go off and climb a volcano, or do a rum tasting, or go bird watching. In Anguilla terms, that might be going kayaking at night with a LED kayaks you've got, which are great, or sailing with tradition to Prickly Pear Cay. So I think as we're here to kind of help Anguilla, more of those things, the better. The second thing is the sort of eco-sustainability message, which has really been pushed by COP26. And I think when customers are booking where to stay or what to do, if there's a choice between a property that has much more of a green track record, they're much more likely to go for that these days. So that really needs to be addressed by everyone on the island. Mm-hmm. And the third one is really the power of social media coming from the customer rather than what is generated by the media or bloggers. I just went to Kamalami Key, which is in the Bahamas, and they said that they get loads of customers come because they have clients who come and they basically brag on Instagram, and they have lovely pictures, and people just follow for that. So I really think those are the 3 things the trends at the moment.
Yeah, very much so.
Plus the pandemic is sort of drawing people to the Caribbean because it's sunny and spacious and very easy to slot into.
Of course, very true, yeah. And especially such serious topics or serious gatherings such as COP26, as you mentioned, is just reinforcing the sustainability messaging, and also in terms of tourism even more so. I mean, a lot of, there were a lot of speakers, of course, in the British overseas territories, like Anguilla played also quite a big role there. So that is quite encouraging to see, of course, and now to see how it's going to be put into practice. But I think that was very, very important topic that you just spoke about. And I think it's the local experience, right? And I just wanted to bring in John into the conversation, maybe because we had a little discussion a while ago about local experiences and how they are ultimately also put into paper, put onto the magazine, and maybe his take on how we can better, position local experiences and how the media actually can be a bridge for that. John, would you like to
Yeah, I mean, I think especially from, because I work primarily on print, it can be a challenge to cover these Caribbean countries and islands because, there's only so many new resorts that open. And so we have to find ways to cover these places in sort of fresh new angles and also that are especially relevant for today. And we're finding that our readers are very interested in sort of getting off the resort and just finding local experiences that speak to day-to-day life on the island. Finding things that they haven't read before, and that could be, local independent artisans, a food scene that, just hasn't really been covered before. So really, in general, just going beyond the resort and what Nigel was saying, our readers definitely want more than kind of just to arrive and sunbathe for a whole week. So we're looking at every opportunity to tell new stories with a local focus.
Very good. And your magazine also ran an article about Anguilla's tennis scene actually recently.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that was our most recent Anguilla story. And it was so interesting because, I don't think many people in the States, even those that are familiar with the Caribbean, understand that Anguilla has become this center for tennis in the Caribbean. And that's thanks to the Anguilla Tennis Academy. And there's a very interesting story there that we were able to communicate. And it brings in that local human element to just illustrate how the Caribbean is more than you think it is. And this was through the lens of tennis. So yeah, that was really, really interesting.
Thank you for mentioning that, but exactly, it is about those untold stories. And just to emphasize what you just said, basically, and what Nigel said, we need those untold stories that are coming through, especially media, through traditional media that is looking also a little bit deeper and beyond what is on the surface. So that was great. Thank you very much for that. Moving on, actually, I would like to bring in Vivian into the play as well, because I think it's quite important to discuss the importance of itineraries ultimately, but also another business model, if I would call it business model, maybe you should correct me, but a business model that your magazine actually adapted on having hosted tours, or better yet, readers' trips, as I know them from Europe and Germany, for example, Central Europe. They've been doing these readers' trips for quite some decades, some while. So why don't you give us a little bit of an idea of what your magazine is planning there and what the importance of itineraries are, combining it with that new model that you are leading on?
We're partnering with certain tour companies around the world and bringing more of what I call Zoomerify the itinerary. So taking a look at what's on offer, but then bringing in those cultural experiences, those once in a lifetime sort of moments. So the itinerary is really wrapped around your reason to travel. To John's point, maybe a reason to travel to Anguilla is tennis. So things like that. So what are our reasons to travel? We know culinary is important. We know getting together with friends and family after all this time being apart is important. What can an island or a destination offer? And how do we bring that into play in an itinerary? So it's not, 9 o'clock here, 10 o'clock here, 11 o'clock here. It's more, what is that experience, even if it's just something that we infuse into the visit that you can bring home with you, this sort of passion, this idea of spending time somewhere and really bringing that home with you. And that's really what we're finding is travel now. It's all about, why am I traveling? The destination is important, but that reason ultimately is why we go now.
Very good. And how do you see that changing, especially in Canada? I think Barbara earlier mentioned that there has been some changes in the media landscape, but how do you actually form around that, or how do you evolve around that as well? Having a lot of competition, of course, anyway.
Oh, absolutely. But a lot of other people in Canada or press are not really doing that. We have a market of people who really want to travel. 70% of our market wants to go somewhere new. More than half of that wants to go off the beaten track and do something different. So to both the gentlemen's points, it's not about fly and fry anymore. So I can actually work with destinations to create the Zoomer itinerary It can be digital, it can be virtual, it can be connecting with travel advisors and agents, working with groups of hotels and their partners to develop an itinerary, whether it's 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, but it is a partnership, and partnerships are really, really important now. South America, as we just heard, advertorial is king. Here we call them partnerships and co-branded content. So we work on many levels because we have television, radio, magazine, which is the flagship, and digital. So we can bring those itineraries to life through our travel hub that we will be launching in early January.
All right, beautiful. Since we're speaking of different media and how they managed actually to combine the different efforts, I would like to bring Eduarda to the play as well. Eduarda is working for one of the, I think 36 years Brazil Travel News TV has been online, or has been broadcasting actually. And while we heard from other markets that especially broadcast travel has declined, and usually broadcast travel or broadcast TV is known for hard news and for more documentation or documentaries, how do you focus actually on getting good travel content onto TV, Eduarda? How is that? How does your channel actually manage to do that? Since you're also based in the US, catering to a South American audience.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm learning a lot from you all. I'm in New Orleans, actually, participating in the Travel International Showcase. Also a very important event for our industry. So speaking of challenges, Brazil Travel News is a very traditional media in Brazil, 36 years. And of course, always doing printing, like print magazines, and always trying to be more digital, but always, it's always a challenge. So we've been printing magazines and also on TV, broadcasting for like Open Channel in Brazil, SBT. It's one of the most important TV channels in Brazil too. So we're working with the most traditional medias in Brazil, printing and TV, Open Channel. Of course, with the pandemic, we try to be more digital. So the first thing we did is to create our podcast. So, which was amazing for us because everyone here is talking about storytelling. So the same with our audience in Brazil. They want to know what's happening. They need information. So we couldn't print our magazine. We couldn't travel to create content for our show. So the podcast was the key by the time, and we are still going with the podcast. We have new episodes every Monday to discuss about what's happening in our industry. So a little bit of the difference. I mean, I'm from Brazil. I'm living in the US basically to create content here to promote the US in Brazil. It's always a challenge because Brazilians, they need a type of information that sometimes when I work with TV channels here in the US, or I work with some Mexican TV channels as Univision, Telemundo, it's always different. And in Brazil, they are very specific about content. So I can tell you all, storytelling, I think it's the number one. And nowadays, of course, they are looking for more exclusive place to go. They want to go to where nobody's going. Oh, this is very new, so I want to go there. So where did you see this information? Oh, it's not because just an influencer or a blogger. I read it on this very traditional website or very traditional media. I think for us, being very traditional was a good thing at the end of this whole pandemic, because people are looking for us. They are coming to us to ask questions and to ask for advice. So what do you guys recommend? Is it safe to go there? Well, how long? So how many days? So I think for us in general, like it's been a good thing to be more traditional.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that is probably also effect when it comes to story pitching, right? I would guess. So maybe we go back to the US for a minute or two. Just from John's perspective, like what is important to you when destination marketing organizations, or even you, then move on to pitch a story to your editor? Like, what is the different, I don't want to say steps, but what makes it attractive for you actually to be able to pitch a story to get an approval, basically?
Well, I mean, it can be challenging, as I said, because, resorts are often the way in to cover the Caribbean. And obviously that doesn't happen, every few months. There's not a new Anguilla 5-star resort opening. So I think that the first step is kind of going through the last few years and making sure that we haven't yet covered something. And that's something, that you can do basically online, and seeing through the archives, like what's been covered by the magazine before. It can be a little challenging sometimes because our digital site is so vast and expansive, and there are stories on there that haven't been in print. But it's just something to be aware of is good. And then, of course, we always want to know what's happening currently, news, even if it's not resort related, if there are new government initiatives to help, independent, whatever artists, culinary related. So anything that sort of is happening that can be accessed by a reader. And it really comes back to telling those stories that are still largely unknown in the States. Even festivals, markets, things that, just they wouldn't be aware of. Yeah. So, but it's a very all-encompassing process. There's no formula. Sometimes the smallest idea can spark an idea for a bigger story. But usually the kernel is something happening currently that is perhaps wasn't happening 2 or 3 years ago.
Can we maybe say that stories became even more micro by now? And
yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, especially the tennis thing is a great example. That is such a niche type of story, but at this point, it's what readers want to know about. They've seen the roundups of the top, 5 resorts on the island. They've seen, these types of very macro level stories and coverage, and they really want these specific niche type of topics to delve into. And for so many travelers, I mean, that's the impetus to book a trip. It can be the smallest thing. Understanding that the Four Seasons offers tennis lessons from a local who grew up on the island and runs this tennis academy. And so it's sort of like a domino effect where one small thing can lead to bigger things and eventually a story.
Very true. Yeah. Since we have 3 editors here from magazines or from TV channels directly, and we have 1 freelance writer with us, I would like to hear about the difference from Nigel in between being, or what the difference is actually in being a freelance writer in comparison to an editor, or how would you define it? So I would like to push you forward for that.
Well, I've actually seen both sides because I was a travel editor of Marie Claire magazine here for 15 years. But I much prefer being a freelancer because you're a lone gun and you go off and find great stories and you please editors. So I would encourage everybody to work more with freelancers because they're hungry beasts and they normally get lots of stories out of one trip compared to staff writers who work very hard, but sometimes they can't spend too much time in the destination. And they also sometimes they see it as a bit of a freebie, or although some in the UK do have to take it as holiday, so that's not always true. The advantage of having editors or staff writers visiting is they understand their publication a lot more closely. They make sure the story will probably come out quicker because they'll have an influence on the schedule. Whereas a freelancer, may write a story and it could sit around for up to a year before coming out. So there's vulnerabilities and sort of strengths on both sides. But I think in terms of generating stories that are going to knock an editor off his or her seat, then just being a lone person who's just scouting around and talking to everybody from the the bellhop to the manager. That's really a way to get what we call storytelling.
True, yeah. And since you're working alone and you don't have a big organization or a bigger organization behind you to support you with, let's say, your travel arrangements or so, how much far in advance do you like to have your trips planned out actually, and with what kind of support?
I tend to just, I find a good story and I sit on it. So I did one in Africa about a colony of chimpanzees that had been sitting on an island since the 1960s that nobody knew about. And that took about a year to pull together. But obviously there's a lot of topicality when you write about the Caribbean. In the UK, there's always a mass, around October, all the publications panic and think, what are we going to do for winter sun and everything for that? So you just have to react to the mood of the time. I mean, and be topical. Barbados just became a republic, I think today actually. Yeah. So there was a flurry of interest in that. I've just written a piece for the Telegraph about, which is in on Saturday, 10 secret islands of the Caribbean. That's to say ones you wouldn't obviously think of going to, of which Anguilla is included, you'll be glad to know. So the people are casting around for fresh ways to cover what is quite a familiar territory.
Okay, it's always a fresh way, but it's of course always combined with a traditional.
Yeah, there's only so many ways to describe a beach.
Exactly,
Which we
right.
will have to
Very
say.
true. Very true. Very true. How is it for TV actually? How is it for the content that you are providing to your viewers, Eduarda? Is it the same more or less? Is it? I think. Well, I would guess that you would probably need a bit more time in advance, maybe, for the crew to travel, etc. Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it was a big change for us with TV too, because I usually travel, with a lot of people with me, a cameraman, a producer, and people looking for content. And I actually have here with me, now I have this little camera here. So it's just me and my camera. So as he said, it's more freedom, If I have a little thing that I can record with a very good quality, like high quality, I have more freedom to create content for different type of content. So for example, I also do a lot of race cars. I cover the races here in the US to send it to Brazil. So for example, I was in Atlanta to cover about restaurants and bars. And then I saw this amazing Porsche experience. And then I have more freedom to go there and cover this attraction for Brazilians. So I think the big change that we have producing with content for TV is freedom. We don't really need like that a huge team, lots of people traveling with me to a destination to create content. I think nowadays it's more easy to create because we have more technology. I can create the content, I can record myself, I can record the interviews, send it to my editor in Brazil to do the video editing and publish on TV next Sunday, for example. So for TV, I think it's just it's more about the technology. The new technologies are helping a lot to create the content.
Okay, all right. And since you know both markets very well, right? You know the US very well, you know Latin America and in particular Brazil very well. So what would you say are the two main differences in between those countries when it comes to consumption, basically, to consumption and also to production in a furthest sense?
Yeah. It's very different, and I do have some different examples. So, for example, if I go to discover a new beach in the US or a new resort, I'm gonna write about this place, and I'm gonna tell my audience in Brazil, hey, for example, if you go to this beach, you can park your car here. You don't have to pay for parking. You can go to the beach, enjoy, go for a walk, go for a run, and then you can leave your purse behind your chair, it doesn't matter, and enjoy your day by the beach. And then sometimes with my American friends, they see it and they are like, why are you telling them they can leave the purse or leave their cameras and go for a walk? And then sometimes I just need to explain, because unfortunately, sometimes in Brazil, you're not going to go for a walk, you're not going to go for a run and just leave your camera or your phone. So it's a very specific information that we need to tell Brazilians. and also about price. Everywhere they go, they want to know, okay, this is amazing. I love this resort. I love the restaurant, but how much is it? How much is the coffee? How much is the ice cream? They're very focused on prices. And I think with my American friends, American audience, of course, they want to know about prices. They want to know about it's a safe place, but I don't think it's the priority like it's for us in Brazil.
Understood. Thank you very much for that. Vivian, do you see anything that your editors would like to see more, or is there some story ideas that you would like to just present to us, maybe that you would like to see even more so?
Well, I do agree. I do agree with everyone else. I think it's important to find that nugget, that one relevant nugget. And I think it's important when you're pitching to an outlet that you understand who their audience is first. And that's very important. So it's very easy to figure out who we are at Zoomer and who our audience is to help tailor those. And Barbara does that very well. She knows who our audience is. So when you tailor a pitch, the understanding is you know who we are before the pitch even gets to my email. So I can see what is happening that's relevant to my audience, because that's really important. The story also almost starts with the pitch coming to me, and then I can hone down that pitch. So if it's music, for example, is something really important to our audience. We have 2 radio stations as part of our media group, and so music is another reason to travel. Knowing where the new resorts are great, but again, I can't write really about just a new resort opening, but knowing that resort is bringing a unique experience that you may not be able to get anywhere else in the Caribbean it just adds that layer of, okay, now I can tell a story. And it could just be one sort of moment. Also, to Eduarda's point, Canadians are also very value conscious and safety conscious. So they actually want to know that information as well. Not so much in print, because print is about that dreamy, aspirational, wow, I really want to do that or see that or experience that. But online, you have this great opportunity to really bring the service element. So that's where maybe more of an itinerary-based trip works. But we are kind of pushing away just itinerary-based trips. So we're not really accepting those trips anymore. We really need a bit more of relevance to our audience and how it speaks to them and what they're looking to do next, safety, value. And I think with Anguilla, the idea of, I think in our readers' minds, it is a bit more private. So it's not just about resorts, but it's about those places that you can stay in longer, because that's very important for our snowbirds and our winter vacationers. They want longer stays, safety, being a part of the culture and being local. And I think Anguilla does sort of bring that to the table through the villas and the cottages and all the locals that love to come in and help you cook and get you going outside and giving you the tours. So those are the kinds of things that work for my audience.
Okay. And before we go a little bit more into the details of how you would like a trip like this to be organized and how the financial involvement is from the magazine side, from the freelancer side, but also from the destination marketing organization side, I would like to just make a little roundup in between the 5 of us or 4 of you to understand how the Caribbean is actually trending at the moment with your publications, but also with your market. How do you see that coming along? And maybe Vivian, if you want to continue, just.
Well, it's snowing here. It's snowing.
So that's it.
And so weather is a big thing. Winter vacationing is a huge thing. And I think someone mentioned earlier that winter's coming. So the Caribbean is always trending. It's perceived as safe, especially in these pandemic times. The one thing I would say is more accessibility is very important, and ease of travel. So airlift, the less stops, the better. We don't necessarily want to have to stop in the US, because that means going through customs and immigration twice. So I say airlift is super important, and getting people there once they're on the ground as well. Accessibility is very important. So it's ease of travel that's bringing people to the Caribbean, and safety. I think people do think it's still quite safe.
Eduarda, would you like to
Yeah,
continue.
definitely. You know, in Brazil, people they couldn't travel, of course, the last year. So now they are like, oh my God, I want to travel. I want to leave my house. I want to go anywhere. And then if we talk about Caribbean, of course, they love it. It's a romantic destination, but it's also a fun destination to go with your friends, to go with your family, even with your kids. So they all love the Caribbean in Brazil. So I think the number one now to bring more Brazilians, they all, I can say, they have money to travel now because they couldn't expend money the last 18 months. So they are just looking for places, but they are also looking for discounts. So they're like, oh, if I go to Anguilla, I can be there for 7 nights, and then I'm going to have breakfast for free if I stay in the resort. Or I'm gonna stay for 3 nights and they're gonna give me a special tour. They always want something else, you know, that plus, that gift to feel like more special. So I think it's nice to create a specific content, always showing them, hey, come visit us. And if you are here, you're gonna get something else. I think they love surprises, and they are, of course, ready to travel and just looking for places. So this is why we are here, just creating content and showing them how amazing is Caribbean and so many places around the world.
Sure. Nigel, I'm sure you have
thoughts. Yes. Well, the Caribbean is on a roll with the UK at the moment, because when we had our ridiculous traffic light system, most of the Caribbean islands were the only ones that had the green light. So lots of people were going there quickly while they could and coming back and reporting very favourable things. And now things are a bit more normalised, touch wood. All the airlines are increasing their flights and adding extra flights to new destinations. Capacity is increasing, and tourist boards are working full out to get people over. There's a big cricket tour coming out next year, and we're very happy to keep going to the Caribbean, and nobody really comes back and says, oh, that was a terrible idea. I think from Anguilla's point of view, and for other smaller islands, they really need to stress how easy it is to fly into a hub and then immediately get onto the next space. I mean, I don't think it really sinks until you've done it. People worry about, you know, how am I going to get onto Mystique or move on to Dominica or somewhere, or to Anguilla, and they need to be reassured that it's a very smooth process and it doesn't add a huge amount more money to your travels, and actually it's quite fun. So I think there's room for growth in that area.
Very true, yeah. And putting the way as the destination as well, or as part of the destination, yes, to the destination experience.
Yeah, well, I think they all love the look of the beaches in Anguilla, but it just hasn't entered their consciousness that they can just fly into Antigua, get off a plane, and then get on another little plane and still have time to have a cup of tea when they arrive.
Yeah, very true. As you would do it when you have to connect to a secondary destination or to a secondary city anyway, right? But correct. But probably because of water in between and being so many islands.
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't always work too well. I mean, sometimes the planes are a bit kind of laissez-faire, let's say, and you know, there's always that rush to get to the next destination before the sun sets and things. So
yeah, true.
But it's all part of the adventure, I would say.
Exactly. Yeah, very much so. John, is there anything you would like to add, perhaps, to a trending Caribbean destination, or to?
Well, I mean, I would just, to Nigel's point, I think that it's important to highlight accessibility, especially for Americans, because we have such little vacation time compared to Europe or other parts of the world. You know, especially around New York and the Northeast, people want to know, okay, how long is this going to take me? Can I do it in a 4-day weekend? Because I don't have the time to often spend an entire week somewhere. So those are very important points to touch on. And, you know, but every winter, without fail, we will certainly run several Caribbean stories. And so, you know, the timing of when those issues comes out is something to think about. You know, November through March, say, is kind of when we really target Caribbean coverage for the print magazine. Yeah, and then, you know, I'll say the US obviously is so vast. The West Coast can be a challenge in terms of coverage for the Caribbean because they have Hawaii. And so that is something to think about, as well as how to target areas of the United States that might have other options in terms of warm weather, tropical, resort heavy sorts of destinations. And that's something I'm happy to brainstorm with anyone.
Okay, all right. And maybe sticking to that topic, if you look at previous press trips that you have done, right, working with DMOs, with different resources, etc., what do you think is, or how would you describe actually, what would you describe as a best practice number one, and what is something that you actually don't want to be bothered with, even though someone means good and wants to offer you, the 5-star massage, whatever, but actually that is not something you would like to do in minds of people. It's that added value, right? But how do you balance this, and how would you like this to be balanced actually from a DMO perspective as well, and from a hotel perspective ultimately too?
Well, I would say the first thing is that we have really moved away from group press trips, and we really much prefer individual trips for writers or staff members, just because they tend to be very prescriptive, and we don't want to run a story that 4 other publications will be running. So I would say that's the big sort of macro takeaway is really we're looking for individualized, customized trip that is sort of driven by what we are most interested in covering, rather than sort of like a set schedule from morning to evening created by someone else. It's much better to have a collaboration when we plan trips for writers, for stories. And it's just really about working together on creating the right kind of trip to tell a specific story.
Could I add to that?
Please, yes, please.
I would say more experiences, less food. I always think when tourist boards arrange itineraries, they begin with the meals in the restaurants, and then they put in the actual stuff that makes the story. And I think it should be the other way around. They should think, what are the amazing experiences that are going to make a sort of scintillating paragraph, and then we can grab a bite afterwards. And I've wasted so much time on trips, on meals, waiting for someone to finish their dessert before I can actually get off and go and see the parrot or the catamaran or whatever I really want to write about. So that would be a little plea from my corner.
Totally understood. Yeah, and usually it's 3 meals, right? And no one in his normal or everyday life it's 3 full meals, right? But I totally understand. Would the others agree actually with the approach of that group press trips are kind of obsolete of some sort? Are you in full agreement with that, or do you still have and find pleasure meeting with colleagues or having colleagues on the same trip? How do you reflect on that, Vivian?
I mean, I think John and Nigel mirrored what I just said a few minutes ago about it being a little more geared toward who we are versus the destination. I think that I agree with the press trips. Small press trips are okay when I'm talking group press trips. So I would be 3 people. I'm still okay with, because typically, and this is another sort of tip, is that typically you would have a daily, a newspaper, a magazine, more traditional like me, and maybe digital. So you still have different ways of telling the story rather than 5 traditional print and the 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. itinerary. So I do think that it's okay, but I do think the press trips have to be smaller or independent and collaborative to have a look at the itinerary beforehand and actually be able to say, well, you know what, these 3 things are not things that I need to experience for my audience. I think that sometimes the PR forgets that, yeah, of course I want to jump out of a plane, but my audience may not. So I have a responsibility first of telling my audience a story that really is targeted or geared toward them, even if it is something new, rather than force feeding them something that they may not want to do, but it was the only thing on option for me when I arrive at the destination to write about. In fact, I would rather not write about it at all than have to, write something terrible.
Understood.
Yeah.
No, we fully agree here at the tourism board as well with keeping group press trips small, if at all, basically. But yeah, 3 to 4 people, even previous roles where I've worked, 3 to 4 people was actually the maximum of press trips that we would do, which I find, is a great size to have. But while the 4 of you have your audiences, we have our stakeholders in our back, right, which are supportive, of course, most of them, and some big names behind that. But we of course have also some which are quite small, right, smaller stakeholders, smaller partners, that we need to support. How would you also, recommend a partner of ours, or any partner that works with a DMO with smaller budgets, more modest budgets? How would you recommend them actually reaching out to media if they would want, to pitch a story to you, if it's not coming through us? Because we have some on our call today, of course, who are listening in, some of these smaller partners who might want to reach out, to any one of you or to any other journalist of that caliber to, pitch a story. What would you recommend them to do when it's about a smaller budget as well? Of course, working with the tourism board is one thing, but besides that, what would your recommendation be?
Shall I start with that?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, I would suggest that they say they have a small hotel. I would suggest they take a walk around the pool and see what all their customers are actually reading, the magazines or, what's on their Kindles or whatever, and just find out, where they get their information from, and maybe give them a questionnaire. Let them tell you what's going to influence them and how they've ended up at their property. I think you have to know your audience, and then if you find that they're all reading Travel and Leisure or something, then you think, oh well, we should probably get in touch with them in that way. So that would be my tip.
Mm-hmm. All right, turning it around, which is always a good way to do. How is that in TV, Eduardo? How would you go about it, basically, or what is your recommendation ultimately? And I'm sure having such a big market like the US, where you have all the different sizes of partners, stakeholders, and so on that you need to present, how do you go beyond that fact?
Yeah, I think for a small business, as restaurants or hotels, as Nigel said, I think knowing your audience is the number one priority, and also creating good content, but I mean like good quality. Even if you have like a small budget, don't go with like a not nice picture, don't go with a low quality video, because even if you don't have that money to invest in a good quality content, do something else. Don't try to be on the market. Don't try to show your property, to show your business. Okay, I'm gonna create a video. If it's gonna be a low quality video, it's better to not do that. Let's be more creative. Let's use maybe some pictures. Let's do something else, articles. And then, of course, always working in collaboration. Sometimes you're gonna meet someone that need a portfolio, like to get images, to fly drones. That's something that we've been doing a lot. Every place I go, I fly my drone. And it's something that I mean, it's important to me to have beautiful images. And if you are a small business and if you want images like to fly a drone on your property, always trying to work in like a collaboration. I think it's very important too.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. Anyone else wants to add? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I would just say, for example, like a small hotel, honestly, like if they have a great Instagram, that goes so far, because it's such an easy, quick way to evaluate, at least superficially, like what might appeal to our readers and sort of what their aesthetic and philosophy is all about. And it's it's free, but as Eduardo was saying, it's important to have the right kind of level of quality, because you could have a beautiful property and you just won't be able to convey that with poor photographs or bad videos. And I agree, it's better to just not have them as opposed to a poor quality imagery and aesthetics.
Okay. So it goes many ways then, basically, of what we just heard. Yeah. Before we come to a close and before we receive hopefully some questions, is there anything that you would like to maybe say that we haven't asked? Is there any message for our partners or for the Anguillians directly, maybe, who are involved in tourism? Again, many of you have been on the island a couple of times. Some of you haven't, as we heard, but we're going to change that soon. So, so that is that. But if there's anything you would like to mention, again, as a key takeaway, as an added value for our partners, please do. And otherwise, if you have any message for us or for our partners, for the Anguillians, please feel free to express that.
I mean, I just want to say that in Brazil, I think you guys are doing an amazing job in terms of the press release you guys sent. We also do press releases and email marketings. We have one every week we call Turismo em minuto, which is like tourism in just 1 minute, like the most important news. And I think when we talk about like mailing lists and press releases, is something that as a journalist, I don't really like receiving like so many. And then every time I see your press releases, I think it's like the right information, not so much information, nice pictures, nice to read, always like something different to learn about the destination. So I just would like to say that it's a great job.
Thank you very much. And the extended thanks go to our South American office. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Georgios.
Yeah, and when you get those press releases, having those images as part of it right off the bat really makes a huge difference, because having to go back and forth, if you see something that's really interesting that would work on our newsletters, for example, we have 80,000 subscribers to our travel newsletter, and sometimes it is just those hits of news that can work quite well on a digital, but without the photos, it makes it more difficult. So I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Photos are very important. Timing is very important, of course, and that's why we're pushing to fill this gap as well. Nigel, anything you would like to add?
My thought is from an Anguilla perspective, if probably not for the tourist board, but if there are hoteliers or tour operators watching this, is what Anguilla has a unique position in the Caribbean. It's so close to many other islands. Why you don't kind of partner with other hotels or other things to do. You're so near to St. Martin, for example, and people like the idea of twin center. They like the idea of getting 2 islands for the price of 1, or maybe popping over to St. Bart's or even Sabre or somewhere. There's lots of many options to do, and that it's like you can only go to Anguilla, which is only 16 miles long, when in fact you could do a lot more in that region. And I think if you facilitated that, then everybody will probably benefit. It's just people don't really have much sense of geography these days. They don't actually know where anywhere is, and they fly in, and it's always when you're flying in the Caribbean in a little plane, you see a little island out of the window, and you spend ages trying to work out where it is, and Google never seems to help you. So I would remember your geography, might be my lesson.
I'm glad that some travel or tour operators, better yet, are selling those twin center trips ultimately. But you're right. Some of the hotels, I mean, some of the bigger brands that we have here on island are cross-promoting. Of course, there are other properties on other islands, such as St. Martin and so on. But then there's only a few of them who are able to do that. So it's much more based on the travel trade and ultimately on the accessibility in between that. But thank you for that comment. I think it's quite valuable also to when it comes to because as we know, many of the hotels are big marketing powerhouses as well, especially the bigger brands. They have a very wide reach, so they're able to actually do that. If John or Vivian, if you would like to add anything, I see that we don't have any questions yet, so we'll maybe give it another 1 or 2 minutes or so. If there's anything you would like to add, otherwise, I'm very pleased and thank you very much for being part of this panel again. As many of you know, John joined us from the West Coast. It's quite early, so he was up very early. So thank you again for that, John. But for everyone else as well, I mean, it's already afternoon in the UK, and Canada is fine. US is fine too, so you're all good. But thank you very much for joining us. I think it's great. I think it's great to have you all on the panel, to speak to you, to get to know you, and when we had our calls before, but also now. And we'll keep on up with a good job that we're doing already. But also, of course, there's always spaces where we can get better as well. So we'll take all of the comments to heart as well. And we will also pass them on to the partners that weren't part of the call. But thank you very much for these insights. And I hope to our guests, to our audience, that we could give a good update on what we're doing, on how we're working with media and how media wishes to work with any DMO. and with any industry partner here on the island. So thank you once again. Thank you very much to the panelists, to our agencies. And if we don't have any questions at this stage, then we can call it a beautiful day. So thank you very much again.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you all. Thank
Good
you.
fun.
So
Very
much.
interesting. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Find what's been missing, whatever that is, because we are all searching. Sometimes it's giving attention to an important bond. Other days it's just taking in the sun, because that makes you feel so alive. You know, so alive. And seeing parts of history, and then yourself in that history. Boy, that's an experience like you've never had before. Whether you're with a friend or maybe you're going it alone, however you choose to take on the sights, know that here we are taking a bite out of every single piece of life. Let me tell you something. When you taste a grilled fish that has just come fresh out of water, there is nothing like it. There is nothing like it that could come to my mind. Anguilla is where you fall in love with whoever, but most importantly, with yourself. Because when you find yourself, you end up finding things you didn't even know could be found.